All right, everyone. We are ready to begin the October 14th meeting, 2021 of the Hastings Economic Development and Redevelopment Authority. We are open. Looks like we have a quorum this evening. We will go ahead and take a gander at the minutes right away. Does anyone have any questions or comments from our last meeting? All right, if we have no comments or additions, maybe we can entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the minutes?
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second? All right, thank you, commissioners. We have a first and second to accept the minutes from our last meeting. All in favor of accepting those minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right, the minutes have been accepted. On to item number 3 this evening will be the bills for September. It looks like we have 3 items on here that maybe John or Eric have a little bit of explanation for.
Sure, Mr. President. Looking at the bills, and here they are right here. A couple of legal bills we've got for our legal services, General HEDRA, and then Eric and I attended the Economic Development Association conference. And I'll stop there and say, I attended the Economic Development Associated conference. He ran it. So I want to give him a special shout out for the work that he did as the conference chair. It was a great conference. So that's what that expense was. And then we have our portable toilet contract. So those were the bills. Isn't that a good note, huh?
A big moment. All right, if anyone has any questions for the bills for the last month? All right, if we could, we can look for a motion to accept. All right, we have a first. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, commissioners. All those in favor of accepting September bills, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The bills have been accepted. All right, moving on to item 4 this evening, business. Item A, it looks like we have a public hearing and we will be potentially adopting resolution 2021-17, which will authorize the signature and purchase and development agreement between HEDRA and Dream One LLC for Lot 1, Block 2, Hastings Industrial Park, number 7. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. President. This project was introduced to HEDRA at your meeting last month as in terms of a general concept. This project actually dates back to roughly the end of April, first part of May, when WSI Sports first reached out expressing general interest in Hastings as they were considering various locations for their project. As was mentioned, project they've kind of landed on Lot 1, Block 2, that's shown on the screen here, the southeast corner of Enterprise Avenue and Spiral Boulevard. It's a 2-acre site based on the preset price of $1.54 a square foot. It's got a market value, according to HEDRA, of just over $134,000. Here's the conceptual site plan that was submitted by WSI Sportswear. It would be a 20,000 square foot building with plans, or at least the ability to add on roughly another 7,000 square feet over time. Roughly a $2.15 million building in its inception. Based on the land credit policy, that would generate a $215,000 land credit, thus wiping out the full value of the property and reducing the sale price down to $1. Currently, it would be 10 jobs with an expectation or a best estimate by the business that it would add an additional 10 jobs over 5 years. The subsidy would not be linked to the jobs, as the construction credit would be adequate to drop it to the dollar. This is where this one gets a little bit interesting. As HEDRA may be aware, the construction industry and supply chains are at odds with one another. It's very difficult to get materials. With that said, the project they were hoping to get in the ground and get this project open by June, July of next year. That's not feasible at this point. However, this is a real project. It's not a land speculation. In talking with WSI Sportswear and what dates would be acceptable in the land use agreement and the contract for development, this is where we landed. I will also note that it was very important to WSI that these dates include the on or before these dates. That way, if something does open up on the material side of things, that they could accelerate the project forward and make it happen sooner. Another thing that staff is even more comfortable with this is the land use application date of January 15th. That is still putting the onus on this project to get plans, get them submitted so that they really are ready to go as soon as they get the materials, that this isn't a long-standing project. This item was issued for a public hearing, so HEDRA should hold that this evening. The image on the right is actually a building in Denmark Township that this business looked at and considered purchasing, and something they submitted as the kind of type of building they'd be looking to construct, a high-quality finish product in the industrial park. The dates indicated here on this slide are an update to the contract that was included in your packet, so any action would be subject to updating those as presented this evening by staff. The applicant or the business owner is in the audience this evening if you have any questions for them, and with that I'll stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Eric. Does anyone have any questions for Eric at this time? All right, thank you, Eric. At this point, I guess we can open it up for a public hearing to discuss this matter. Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this motion?
Sure, yeah, for that, we'll get down a little bit of our literature and products that we make.
Sorry. Joel, if you could come to the audience or the podium here, that way the speakers will pick you up.
I had to bring out some of our products we make. For Eric's sake, I had to bring the Packers.
Nice.
And of course, we make all of Tom Brady's cold weather gear, so we had to bring that out. And then of course we got our baking, so we gotta support the local crowd here. So my name is Joel Wiens. I founded WSI 30 years ago. I grew up in Wyndham, Minnesota, and my mom and grandma said, don't spend your $3,000 working on the farm on a four-wheeler. I said, well, you guys start sewing for me. So that's how I got started. And then I moved to Egan, is where presently we have a factory. And the majority of our business, we deal with professional and college programs. We're known as that cold weather expert. And if you may recall, back a few years ago, the Viking-Seahawk game, we had everybody in the field, third coolest game in NFL history, and everybody's wearing WSI. And had the referees even, and then NBC News crew came in that week and said, hey, we need to get outfitted. It's gonna be like 30 below. And so we outfitted everybody. We had 3,200 media outlets around the world carry that story. And so we were busy. So that was one of our big highlights over my 30-year career with WSI. And say known as the cold weather experts, similar to the Under Armour type products, we have a number of patents on different products. We're really proud we make everything in Minnesota, and part of that is keeping jobs in America is really important to me. Innovating products, and that helping to see the product being made locally, that really helps innovate new products, and that's why we've been a leader in a lot of the cold weather and innovative performance apparel. And that's what we're dealing with these teams. I brought Karina with me. She's our production manager, and she actually resides in Hastings. So we actually have 2 employees right now that live in Hastings, and we're excited about the opportunity about bringing everything down here. Besides the team sports, we also are involved with outdoor and hunting. We're in the equestrian market, the ski market, and the tactical category. We have contracts with the DNR, Highway Patrol, and we mentioned we have about a dozen people on staff right now, and we want to grow that, double that within 5 years. And one of our best years actually was during the COVID crisis. We got into the PPE type products, and we're able to supply hospitals. I know we donated a bunch of to the veterans home down here in Hastings. And then we ended up giving back $1 million in mass to help youth sports programs get activated. And we donated those $1 million in mass, which I provided to you, through law enforcement agencies around the country. So our goal was, hey, let's get kids activated and let's unite America. Get the law enforcement and kids back together and under one. So, so we're a small, kind of unique, innovative team. Like I said, that's the way we've received so much press over the years, and we want to bring that to a small community, or nice little community, and want to grow with the community, and so we're excited about the opportunity.
All right, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions right now? This is a public hearing, so is there anyone else that would like to speak to this matter at this time? All right, everyone. Thank
Great,
you.
Thank you. Give you that packet thing, huh? All right, thanks, Rick. Okay.
All right, at this point, do we need a vote to close the public part of the hearing, or? Yes, we do. All right, I will accept a motion if we are ready to do so.
Motion, so moved.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second to close the public hearing?
I'll second.
We have a second. All right, all those in favor of closing the public hearing section of this action, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. All right, commissioners, we have some considering to do here. Does anyone have any additional comments or questions at this time? Yes, Mark.
This is a question for Joel. Is this do you ever go into retail, or do you just supply the retail? Would you ever have a storefront?
We do have a storefront actually at our facility, so we will have a little bit of a showroom with this new facility. But we are also looking at options potentially of maybe getting a storefront right down in your retail area downtown.
So currently inside the facility, you would manufacture the product, and your corporate office is in there too, and potentially a small showroom.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, that's helpful on the clarification. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Any other comments by city staff? All right, if not, we are ready to entertain a motion.
I move to adopt the resolution 21-17 as presented.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Vaughn, thank you. All right, all those in favor of, I can make sure I have the right number
And
here.
Mr. President, just want to clarify that the resolution would include those amended dates that Eric had spoken about, that both the maker and the seconder agreed to that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, all those in favor of approving this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, the motion carries. Thank you, everyone. All right, now on to item B this evening, adopt resolution 2021-18, authorizing the signature of purchase agreement for 412 Vermillion Street. Eric, do you have a report for us?
Thank you, Mr. President. On your agenda this evening is a proposed resolution 2021-18, approving the purchase and acquisition for two properties adjacent to the downtown here, commonly referred to as Country Nights and the associated parking lot. This is an action coming out of the HEDRA strategic plan in terms of identification of underutilized and sometimes blighted sites, and for the ability to HEDRA to step in and to make something where there currently isn't much. With that, HEDRA has discussed this in the past. Direction was given to staff in terms of parameters of a potential purchase. Assessed value of the combined properties is just over $266,000. Staff has negotiated with the owner, price of $240,000. That's what's been included in the acquisition agreement that's for you this evening, as well as the resolution that would authorize signature of that acquisition agreement. With that, staff will take questions.
All right, thank you, Eric. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Vaughn.
Thank you, Chair. Eric, what are the thoughts from staff on, I know one of the properties is a parking lot. Is the other one something that we will have to maintain? Or will we make it a cold storage, there's not any utilities going into it? Or do we have a plan to remove it?
Great question, Mr. President, Commissioner Vaughn. Yes, one property is currently a parking lot. Hence, the fire department actually parks there with some other vehicles, their personal vehicles, and then walks over to the fire department. City currently actually maintains snow on that site. for the use of that parking lot as parking. Country Nights facility is currently vacant. At this point, it's staff's intention it would remain vacant until such time that a redevelopment project was to take place. There would be holding costs in the interim, but the intention would be that there would be minimal to no investment in terms of the actual building itself, with the long-term hope that, again, if we have a project to come forward, we want to keep all tools at our disposal, including potentially TIF. And in order to use some of our TIF tools, we need blight. And so we wouldn't want to scrape anything up until we had a project. That way we would have potential buildings that would check the box that would have blight on them. So with this one, potential for some carrying costs, but the intention of staff is that minimal to hopefully very little, if not none, maintenance costs would go to it.
In a
Yes,
follow-up,
Commissioner.
I haven't been in Country Nights Saloon. Is it, are we in, by purchasing this, are we inheriting supplies? And if so, are we gonna try to auction it, get it out of there, or just leave it as mothball the place up until it's time?
Commissioner Vaughn's staff was in there with the listing realtor earlier this summer. The place was mostly vacant. There's still the bar top and some of that there, but it isn't like there's cases of beer, old product from when it was an operating bar and restaurant. Not to say that there aren't odds and ends in the basement, there definitely were, but nothing of substantial business relation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Does anyone else have any additional comments or questions? Yes, Commissioner.
Is the goal to revitalize and reuse the building for a better purpose, or are we looking potentially for a restaurateur to sort of take over, if there's an operating kitchen, et cetera? With the strategic plan, we're kind of looking at improving the way it looks coming into town. So I'm wondering if that shouldn't be a priority, maybe having it repurposed or revitalized in that regard.
Commissioner Sullivan, the intention when staff began looking at this block was, in often cases with EDAs, we take on the most difficult, sometimes the dirtiest projects that frankly the private sector isn't able to tackle themselves. There are a number of various property owners on this block. That's one hurdle for the private market, and that's kind of where HEDRA is beginning to step in to help with some of that site assembly. The intention would not be to utilize the building where is as is and market that to a restaurateur, but rather to, over time, have that be part of redevelopment.
Thank you. Do we have any additional comments or questions tonight? Commissioner Sinclair, yes.
Recognizing the logistics would require some innovation and time, do we even consider entertaining a lease on that property or some revenue generating use of it, given the likelihood of probably a multi-year holding period in the, as we acquire other properties on there?
Commissioner Sinclair, that's a fair question and something that HEDRA could consider if in fact it does move forward with purchasing it. It would then be a balance of what tenant improvements would be made, who's going to pay for those tenant improvements. I don't think HEDRA is going to want to, so it would require somebody to come in, spend money on improvements that ultimately they're not going to get that money back out. It would just be their ability to run a business for a short period of time, more than likely. So going in wouldn't be our goal, not to say it couldn't happen. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, do we have any additional questions or comments tonight? All right, seeing none, we will entertain a motion at this point. Do we have a motion on item B this evening? All right, do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Commissioners. All those in favor of adopting Resolution 2021-18, authorizing the signature of purchase agreement for 412 Vermillion Street, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you, everyone. All right, on to item C this evening, the assessment of revolving loan program. John or Eric, I'm guessing you have a report?
Yep, thank you, Mr. President. Another piece from the strategic plan for HEDRA was to look at existing incentive programs. The next one staff tackled was that of the revolving loan. Just a reminder for those that haven't been on HEDRA quite as long. The purpose of the revolving loan, we're not here to compete with existing private banks. We're here to fill the gap. Oftentimes, these are for projects that maybe aren't large enough to where a bank would want to take on that loan, or maybe that there may be additional risk that a bank may not be willing to take on. That's where we can step in. HEDRA currently has 15 loans being serviced. Charge a interest rate of prime plus 0.25%, with that interest rate recalibrated on most loans every 2 years based on fluctuations in the prime rate. One incentive of the HEDRA revolving loan is that there's no payment interest in the first year. Money can be used for working capital as well as machinery development. When staff began looking at this and the fluctuation of the interest rate every 2 years, the city's accounting department handles really all of the processing of payments and going through the amortization schedule and updating what should be going on with those payments and interest rate. It does create a bit of a backlog in terms of remembering going back, okay, when is the 2 years on each of the loans to then go back and update the prime rate, then update the amortization schedule. And when you are starting to adjust those numbers, instead of having a standard interest rate over a standard number of years, as that interest rate moves, so does the monthly payment, which then trickles down to that principal that's left at the bottom of the loan, which sometimes can create a balloon payment due rather than just even payments for the life of the loan, depending on how that interest rate fluctuates. So we've got a two-pronged issue in terms of staff and going through every 2 years and knowing when each loan hits that 2-year mark, and then also potential balloon payment for the loan holders. Asked around to a handful of communities, see what they're doing with their program. South St. Paul just adopted something I thought was fairly interesting. They have a base interest rate, which is a bit on the high side, but again, not uncommon for these revolving loan programs, which typically take on the higher risk situations. While it starts high, they offer reduction for what they've deemed what they're really trying to incentivize. Meeting with open to business, providing a certain percentage of cash equity in the project, looking for things like increasing energy efficiency in buildings. Those are just some of the examples I pulled up from their program, to where somebody can lower their interest rate and then lock in that interest rate based on their activities. With that, staff is looking at it where 5.5 might be a little bit high. You could look at that and also establishing a floor, because it is still meant to revolve and for the HEDRA to not necessarily lose money on each of these deals, but to at least hold a consistent balance. Also, I wanted to mention that if HEDRA were to revise an interest rate on your revolving loan, it isn't something that's locked in stone, especially as the prime rate does adjust. That is one benefit to the way it's set up right now, where it can kind of catch up or adjust based on prime. You could have something like, January of each year, if you have a flat rate at, let's say 3%, it's something that staff does every year of, hey, January we talk about it and we want to adjust it for any new loans going forward. So with that, staff is just looking for general feedback from HEDRA in terms of, do you like this idea of incentivizing certain actions or activities with revolving loan funds? Is that a good fit? If so, what activities would you like to see? And any other general comments with respect to the revolving loan?
All right, thank you, Eric. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this? Yes, Commissioner.
Hi, Eric. Generally, how long are the terms of the period of the loan?
10 to 15 years typically.
Okay.
That's what we're currently carrying.
So then that would get into the fact that, why we want a consistent interest rate for the term of the loan. We won't want to lock ourselves into that for everybody who comes into the program, because, the interest rates can go up quite a bit over time. Is that correct? So what I'm hearing you saying is you don't want a fluctuating interest rate, right? You want one consistent interest rate, but we aren't locking ourselves into that interest rate from here on in perpetuity, I guess is my question.
Yeah, correct. Commissioner Horst, that's correct. We wouldn't necessarily, or HEDRA wouldn't necessarily lock itself in. It's something you could always look at. But yeah, there are certainly administrative challenges to an interest rate that's fluctuating every 2 years. Not only administrative, but also on the person that's paying in on the loan, knowing what to expect and how they can plan financially.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Eric. Does anyone else? Yes.
Eric, my question is about the reduction in interest rates. So if we did a program where they could reduce their interest rate by certain factors, what would be the frequency with which they could adjust the interest rate? Because I guess what I'm thinking is if the goal is to streamline it and make it more efficient, if there's adjustments all the time because of some of these factors, would that kind of go against the purpose of trying to streamline the process?
Commissioner Brock's good question. How it would work is when they made their, at least how it works in South St. Paul, excuse me, it's part of their application for the loan itself. They submit, hey, we've met with Open to Business, you know, hey, we're adding new windows, that's gonna increase our energy efficiency. So when they submit their application, they're checking the boxes for which they think they have achieved, and then staff can set it so when the actual loan is approved, that interest rate is locked in. It doesn't ever fluctuate again. They get kind of one shot at that.
That makes more sense. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have any additional questions or comments on this? All right, Eric, do you have anything else? All right, I believe we're just looking for a conversation. We're good, all right, thank you.
Yeah, at this point, Commissioners, so our intent is if it sounds like this is something that's favorable to the board, that we would bring back an item for your action at the next meeting.
Yes, Scott.
Only having just gone through renewal of a line of credit and a couple other loan processes, that rate seems really low. Is that, and I'm all for, you know, what is effectively a subsidy to a certain degree, but how do we come up with that rate, I guess? You know, where do you land? And it seems like commercial rates are somewhere in the 5% range kind of right now. So this seems perhaps overly aggressive in terms of a subsidy. I don't know, but I don't really know. I'm curious if we think that's necessarily, because to Peggy's point, you know, how you want this to last a little while, and it seems like if rates start to climb again, which seems to be predicted right now, we're going to phase out of a 2% rate pretty quick. I'm just curious, how do we land on that number?
Right. Commissioner Sinclair, staff threw a dart at a dartboard for purposes of conversation.
Okay.
Now, if HEDRA does like that prime, we could say, hey, you know, our standard is prime, whatever that is.
Yeah, okay.
Rather than fluctuating every 2 years, based on it, be lock it in whatever prime is at that point in which the loan is made. Then in terms of subsidizing, it is still interest, and so if a loan is made at, say, $15,000, HEDRA is making interest on that dollar, not just giving it away. It's coming back, and so while it's less than maybe less interest than that person would have to pay for maybe at a bank, the purpose of the loan again or the program is to fill the gaps where the bank may not be able to step in. So I just wanted to clarify in terms of the subsidy is. I don't know if I use that word for this one.
Yeah, that's fair. I see that point.
All right, Commissioner Vaughn?
Thank you, Chair. I want to follow up with, if it goes on for 10, 15 years, what stops the applicant or the person that owns the loan to come ask us to, hey, I can't afford it. It's getting to be too much. Can I have it at 2%? What if we say no and they default on how do we go back and get our money that we borrowed to them? And I think there's been one case scenario where we waived it, the loan part of it, which I think needs to be a process before we start doing that. So I think I would keep grinding that out to what happens if, role play it out if someone says, yeah, that's too expensive, I want less.
Commissioner Vaughn, each of the, or I should say most ones that I've looked at, the HEDRA revolving loan themselves the guarantee is it's usually a second position mortgage against the property recorded at the county. And so the HEDRA does hold some collateral, albeit not the strongest position because it is second position to the bank. But HEDRA does hold some collateral that if they said, hey, we're not going to pay anymore, that we would have some teeth.
Commissioner Horsch?
Eric, how much is in the revolving loan program and how much do you currently have tied up that's gone out on loans? If you don't have it, that's okay. I'm just trying to see what the scope of this is, coming to it fresh.
we annually allocate is about $120,000 annually.
Okay.
We don't always spend that, but we keep that available.
Okay.
And it comes out of our fund balance, and it's not meant to be an expense as a budgeted expense each year, but more meant to be a revolving account, which funds are expended out for loans and then come back and repayments on that. So the amount that we allocate is about 120 a year. In reality, it doesn't generally get to that amount as far as what's still out.
Okay. So it's been going on for quite a while, so we've got a good pool of money sitting there, right?
Yes, we've been, this program, at least 25 years that
Okay.
we've been doing this program, and it's for commercial, and also if we have a residential component to it, for residential rental rehab as well. So we've given out loans for both.
And what has been your default rate? I mean, has it been very much?
The default rate on that, Commissioner, there's been a few. I mean, over the 20 years that I've been involved in this, we probably, 30, 40 loans that we've given out. There's been one or two that I remember that have come back.
That's very good. Thanks.
Does anyone have any additional questions or comments? All right, so you folks garnered some information and feedback? All right, very good, everyone. Thank you. All right, if we have no further discussion on that, we will move on to
At the time in which the city was going through certification with Excel and gathering all the necessary information, Deed did not have a consultant on board to review that information. Hastings' site was actually inadvertently included in their materials on their website and whatnot. They did an audit of their sites, and it became apparent that they inadvertently included Hastings when they should not have, because it had not been certified by them. They made city staff aware. We looked into it, talked with past individuals that had been in my role to confirm what the situation was, and it was what it was. So with that, staff is essentially providing that update to HEDRA in case you hear anything about, hey, is it state, is it Excel, what's going on? We tend to submit all that information, because again, the city is paid to have all that information gathered. We just need to submit it to the state then for them to review and certify. The deed consultant cost to review that is $3,800. So that'll be coming out of the HEDRA budget. But given the size of the site, it's really good for that program, and the net in which deed is able to cast is just so much greater than what we are able to as a city, so there is benefit to having our site in their program. Happy for any questions.
All right. No questions. All right. So we will move on to item B then, the BR&E visit to Halal Foods.
Mr. President, staff conducted a BR&E visit with Mohammed Rashid. He's the CEO and owner of Halal Foods. The business began in Burnsville in a more of a retail setting. Went really well. Mr. Rashid actually, by profession, is an engineer, and just saw this need in the market, and he and his wife kind of stepped into it, and here they are. This was their expansion into wholesale food business, and they said they've got people coming from both Dakotas, Iowa for these halal meats, trying to fill that gap. Just kind of getting ramped up, getting a few final building permits in and getting those approved. They hope to add 30 employees, so this is something that they see that they want to expand and open. There's just a tiny bit of retail in the very front. With that, we think it's a great business. They did purchase the entire property. They continue to rent a portion of that space to Ferguson HVAC Supply. I understand it's a long-time business of Hastings, so they will stay. Mr. Rashid was very welcoming, was happy to hear from the city, and looks forward to being in Hastings for a long time to come.
All right, thank you, Eric.
Councilmember Vaughn was with us on that trip. I don't know if there's anything you want to add as attending.
Exciting opportunity.
Very good, thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding this? All right, thank you, Eric. We can move on to item C, which is the downtown architectural assessment.
Thank you, Mr. President. As directed, staff reached out to qualified consultants. We did receive proposals. They ranged in price from $25,000 to $37,800. The purpose of this study was to, over time, staff has noticed that there's been some deterioration within the downtown area specifically, and the ability for those buildings to draw rents that can support the sheer maintenance costs of historic buildings sometimes don't always line up. And that we saw sometimes some Band-Aids being applied to problems that were maybe a little bit larger. And so the hope was to find out, okay, what are these actual issues, what might they cost, and then for HEDRA to come up with a program potentially that could help fund the gap and get some of these projects done to ultimately preserve, not to restore, but preserve the downtown. As staff reviewed the proposals, we can talk more about this and getting some feedback from various downtown businesses. The thought came upon us, what if we just didn't do the study and skip to the program? Some of the feedback we got was that we know what's wrong, we just need the resources to help fix it. And we'll go through the process that you need us to go through, that, you know, going through HPAC, or not HPC for review. Again, to make sure that these are being done appropriately to the historic structures, and thought that might make some sense. Staff did submit a CDA grant that would cover half the cost, but there'd still be at least almost $13,000 that's HEDRA would be spending on the study. The thought is that we could instead take the money that would have been spent on the study and use that as seed money for a facade improvement program. In looking at that program and looking at what some other communities do provide, one of which is Rosemount, you can require that they provide matching funds. You can set a cap at the amount that any one project be awarded. Again, staff would still have some control over which projects would get awards to ensure that the work to be done still met the requirements of the historic preservation going through the HPC. And kind of basically like skipping first base and jump straight to second and really put that money to work where you could visually see an improvement. So with that, we're looking for feedback from HEDRA about direction that staff should take, whether we should still pursue a study or jump to a facade improvement program. If a facade improvement program sounds something you'd like to see more about or have more specifics, the intention would be that at your November meeting, staff would bring a draft program for review and potential adoption.
All right, thank you. Commissioner, yes.
Would this be limited to the boundaries of the historic district? Is that the intent?
Commissioner Sinclair, good question. So that's the other piece about potentially doing a facade improvement program as opposed to the study. The intention of the study was to be limited to the historic district or those buildings designated as historic. If HEDRA were to pursue a facade improvement program, we could open that up. That could be a geographic area within the downtown determined by HEDRA or by previous planning studies that say here's the downtown. Could include Vermillion Street. Really the opportunities are a little bit greater there.
Anyone have any additional questions? I do like the idea actually of foregoing the study. I really do like just getting going on this, and if we're trying to reinvent the wheel and there are ones working very well in communities like ours around us, I don't see the need to start from scratch. I think that would be a much more appropriate and direct use of funds personally. So I like that idea. I think that you've clearly done your homework on this, and I feel comfortable relying on the legwork of other programs at this point. I do support the idea of potentially having the ability to extend this past simply the downtown area. I think that as Vermillion Street has now become a very close second in needing attention, I think the possibility maybe for funds to be used on projects in that corridor would be great. One more caveat, maybe there should be just a random catch-all opportunity. And I guess one building that is near and dear to my heart as an architect is the Fassbender Clinic. The job that the Hofgaard family has done in maintaining that has just been unreal. The expense that they've had to go through it's absolutely pristine as the Frank Lloyd Wright building. There are other buildings that are not Victorian era historic in Hastings, but are still noteworthy in their design, but fall out of maybe that time frame that's covered. So I like a little bit of flexibility with that, and I think it would be good for the community overall to have those opportunities available to make sure that treasures that don't happen to fall in the right neighborhood don't get overlooked. Go ahead.
I just would reiterate, I am in support of foregoing a study and moving forward with just assisting private ownership interests and having it the city more beautified. If we can just go directly to work on it, why not? Right.
Thank you. Commissioner Horsch.
So the Rosemount plan that we're looking to build off, it says grants will be awarded on a first-come, first-served basis, and I think this kind of follows up on previous questions. Is that how you'd look at this, or would the city look to have some more prioritization of the grant funds, or first-come, first-served? Have you thought about that?
Commissioner Horst, that's a great question. Typically, these programs are set up one of two ways, either first come, first serve, or there's an application deadline. Let's say this went into effect January 1, you said all applications due by May 30th. And then we'll look at them after that, can rank them, and then decide which ones you wanted to award. That's something that staff would want to noodle on a little bit more and then bring forward to HEDRA as to what your preference would be. I think there's merits in both, and probably something that might even evolve over time if for some reason the money isn't being utilized. The question is something, I don't have a specific answer just yet, but it's something we'll need to think about if we go forward with this.
All right, thank you, everyone. Are there any additional questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Sinclair.
I don't necessarily think we're going off course by foregoing the study, but I would like to see access to some of the expertise from the people that would have done the study. For this reason, I'm going through this myself right now with a brick building, a 50s era, not a 1950s era, not a 19th century. I've had 3 people look at issues and got 3 different opinions as to why we've got issues. And I think one of the challenges with some of these older buildings is we know what the problem is, but we don't know why it's a problem. And it takes somebody that understands those older buildings to understand, hey, what those wall assemblies, why they create issues with moisture intrusion or, roof assemblies. So I'm just trying to think about a solution that would, anybody can call any architect, of course, or, a roofing expert or a window expert, but it'd be nice if the program included even a recommendation, maybe a strategic partner, somebody that was vetted, that had experience providing this. I'm going back to the study just because I imagine the people that responded to it are firms that are good at doing those assessments and explaining why they're having an issue, and here's a recommended resolution for it. So I'm just trying to figure out how do we don't necessarily just go out and pay a bunch of money to go find 10,000 problems when we really only have the funds to fix about 200 of them. That doesn't really move the ball forward, but it'd be nice to have that expertise inherent in the program. So not a recommendation, just trying to think through how do we, it kind of incorporates some access to that expertise, I guess, is what I'm driving at.
Yeah, Commissioner Sinclair, I think in terms from a staff standpoint, our ace in the hole is our city planner, Justin Fortney. One of the consultants that did submit came down and did a walk downtown with Justin and I, and as the architect and the engineer were going through and pointing things out, Justin was right there, hand in hand, pointing out, well, hey, what about this, what about that? So I feel really comfortable that he'll be able to kind of point towards, hey, did you think about this, or did you think about that? You make a good point about, hey, here's maybe some preferred partners. I get a little bit nervous about recommending one over another potentially. One thing that I believe the Rosemount program offers is that they will kick in money to help pay for getting somebody that's qualified to tell you what's wrong. Sometimes that might even be the issue with the current fixes as well. I can call so-and-so, the state local handyman, and they can put something on there and it's fixed, even though maybe I would have liked to call architect XYZ, but they were to charge me $500 just to come look at it. Maybe that's a way that HEDRA can bridge a gap.
Okay.
All right, good comments, everyone. Yes, Commissioner?
Do we have a sense for what the cost is of an average size problem and project? Kind of how many different projects we would be able to fund in a given year?
Commissioner Brock's short answer is no. I think what the limiting factor would be, and see, if you want to do approach something like this, again, similar to Rosemount, hey, if it's good, just go with it. Pilot, we got $20,000, we want to see how far we can make $20,000 go. We'll do a max of, just to split it evenly, $5,000, and if a one-to-one match and it costs more, well, hey, you got to bring more.
I just want to make sure whatever we propose is helpful, and I want to be helpful in getting the project accomplished. And I don't have a sense of what a historic external renovation would cost. So that's what I'm just trying to understand is how far we can go with a certain amount of money. But yeah, I like your idea of doing a pilot because we can try it out and see. I like the idea of the program. I also like the idea of expanding it beyond just the downtown and allowing Vermillion Street to be included. I think that having other areas of the city able to be a part of the program would be valuable. And if we got more requests than we had money, then we kind of know, how much work there is yet to do. So I like that idea too.
All right, thank you, everyone. Do we have any additional questions or comments? Excellent. Do you have what you need, Eric?
Just to confirm, what I'm hearing is staff should forego the study, notify the consultants that we're not going to move forward with it, and to draft a program to bring back to the November meeting.
That sounds good. All right, thank you. All right, on to item D, which is the development update for our Fair Hamlet.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, probably the number one story we have is not within your packet, and I'm sure everyone's heard that Fleet Farms made an investment in the former Target building, which we're very happy about. Been very helpful to have Eric and Justin involved in working with CBRE and then ultimately working with Fleet Farm over the last month or so. So the plans on that building are they are going in and doing demolition as we speak, putting together their plans for the interior remodel. They will keep the building, remodel the building. It'll be a Fleet Farm store. They won't have a tire service or gas pumps, but I think most other product lines would be within the facility. There would be a lumber yard, building materials yard to the east of the building and an existing parking lot, so we are working with them as to what the design of that would look like. And they will be working on their plans, hope to have some substantial completion towards summer of 2022 and be open later on that summer. So great to see that project moving forward. Along with that, we have a number of other projects that are happening here, update-wise within your packets. I'm trying to think of other updates that I can provide as well. With the Summergate annexation, we're still waiting on that annexation application to come in, but that continues to move forward for 160 homes at the south end of the city off Highway 316. Council did give final approval to the Luke Seaward apartment project for 32 units, so that entitlement role is done. He's working on his financing on it, and we're looking at establishing a closing date for final sale of that property, so that's great to see. On the Quill at Schoolhouse Square, the senior apartment, they're going to be breaking ground here shortly. There's going to be a groundbreaking, I think, coming up next week on that, and they closed on it about a week ago. So they want to get in the ground this summer, finish it up, about a year construction on that project. With the stencil project downtown at the UBC site, we have signed a lease with the custom sawdust building in the industrial park. I shouldn't say we as HEDRA, but as the city. We as HEDRA are the landlords, and we have our tenants as the city using that facility. We no longer need them to use the facility because we want to redevelop it into housing, into 85 units. But uses that are within that facility need to be done elsewhere. We have found the custom sawdust site. Now, you may recall very shortly, we did approve a land sale and land credit application for that project, and that still is there. They're still held to the requirements of performance related to jobs and related to building valuation. The difference is, instead of sawdust going in there, the city would be the tenant for a period of time. So the council did approve that lease at their last meeting. So those are probably the most substantial updates that I see here. The rest of the things continue to move forward, and I can stand for any questions.
All right, any questions for John? All right, not seeing any additional questions or comments at this point. I believe our next scheduled item is to move into a closed door session.
Mr. Chair, I think the next item would be move into that. We're seeking a motion to close the meeting pursuant to Minnesota State Statutes 13D.05 subdivision 3C. The purpose of this closed door session would be to determine the offer for the purchase price of properties located on Block 28, Town of Hastings. So looking for a member to make a motion consistent with the language that I just stated.
All right, thank you, John. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Do we have a second? Second. All right, thank you, commissioners. All those in favor of closing this portion of the meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? This section of the meeting is officially closed. Thank you, everyone.
And I'll state for the record here too, that this is the last item that we have on the agenda here. So